Hi, I'm Merricks from VenturePath, and before I did all of this, I had quite a different life. I began a long time ago in the music industry, actually, as a band manager and record promoter, and from then I launched a local radio station, and I grew that into a network of local radio stations, taking on corporate investment from the newspaper groups. And then I sold that business to a FTSE 100 company, a much bigger firm, and worked there for a little bit as part of my earnout. And when I left, I went on a buying spree. I raised some venture capital funding, and I went and bought 5 businesses in 4 years and turned them into a digital media group. And I sold that business before I started becoming active in the investment space. And my first role as an investor was as an angel investor. And over time, I grew that into a small syndicate of co-investors that I knew well and trusted and worked with. And over time, that grew into an advisory part of the business where we were helping companies to raise funding. And along all of that journey, along the way, picked up quite a bit of experience in what worked and what didn't, in what companies needed as they were growing. And we've tried to really condense that experience down into what's on offer for founders within VenturePath. So the biggest challenge I faced when I was initially raising funding is I didn't really know what this funding world was. I didn't know quite how you would go about raising money into a business. I didn't fully understand how it worked with other people putting their cash into your business. Up until then, I'd bootstrapped and built businesses with my own cash, with the soft support of friends and family loaning me money, I guess, rather than being equity investors, with early bank loans and some grant funding even in my very first business. So figuring out this whole new world of raising equity investment was new language and a new experience for me. And over time, actually what I found that was consistent was the change was consistent. That having raised an angel round, where your next round is either a corporate venture capital firm or a VC, and I've raised from both, that actually the experience is different each time you go out to raise. So I guess the biggest challenge initially was learning how that all worked, and then it was finding those right kind of investors. And now this date stamps my journey a little bit, but 10-15 years ago it wasn't quite as easy to be signposted to sources of growth capital. It was a bit more of an opaque industry. It was very much a case of kind of who you knew, and if you're not from that world, that could be a little bit daunting. So for me, that was definitely an early challenge, was kind of figuring out the role of external investors and then finding those investors. That was probably my first challenge. I think, as I say, those challenges continue to build. So when it came to VC conversations, you're having to learn different jargon, different metrics, different thinking styles, and it's obviously harder to convince a VC based purely on your gut feel. You've got to have a greater set of proof points, more evidence to back up your story, and I learned that on the way. I took a couple of funding rounds from my VC, and over time that becomes a more comfortable relationship because you kind of know what you're doing, and they know that they're backing you, and that relationship beds in. But initially, it's the steepness of the learning curve was probably my biggest challenge. Yeah, so I've made an odd decision in my life, that having been that entrepreneurial through a few different businesses and had all of the entrepreneurial journey of ups and downs, that I've ended up focusing on the investment piece, but also on supporting entrepreneurs who are on that journey. And I get asked this actually quite a lot, and I don't really know the answer to it. Why did I go down the route of working to help other founders? I think it's because I learned a lot painfully in my own business, and I just sort of felt like that learning shouldn't all have to be done firsthand, that sharing that learning was a helpful thing to do. And in the course of sharing it initially as an angel with companies I was able to back with my own cash, I've turned that into a set of thinking, a set of methodology, a set of approaches that have enabled me to share that experience with over 1,000 entrepreneurs. And we've done that through building early accelerator programs, incubators, seed funds, and all of that has given me a huge sort of platform to share my experiences, initially as a founder and latterly as an advisor to hundreds of founders, with emerging entrepreneurs, with entrepreneurs tackling their Series A, their Series B funding rounds for the first time. So that was probably what sort of drove me, and I think there is an element of that being a calling. I don't think that's something you'd necessarily choose, but it is something I'm hugely passionate about. And when I look back, I've now been advising entrepreneurs for longer than I was actually an entrepreneur. And I hope that gives me an interesting perspective when I'm advising founders, because I'm not giving them feedback purely from a sort of theoretical or academic perspective of it would be better if your business could show these metrics. And equally, I'm not looking at it purely through the lens of a spreadsheet, although I do love a spreadsheet. I'm very much more coming at it from the approach of, we know what we need to do to win, we know what success looks like, we can replicate other people's success where we can share stories and learning, but really boiling that down to what the next steps are for the business and translating that. And I think that's an important job as an advisor to founders as they're growing and raising investment as part of the toolkit to grow their business, is to be able to translate, well, actually day to day, what that looks like is this. And if you do that, that's going to work better for a VC who's expecting that to be the normal, that matches their worldview. So I think that translation piece is one of the things I hope that, having been a founder historically, that brings to the party. The other element there is, if I'm asked the question, what made you an advisor, not an entrepreneur? I still think of myself as quite entrepreneurial. I've pioneered some really interesting things. So in the entrepreneurial days, I was one of the first to do regional promotion tie-ups, and then as I moved into the media world, I was one of the first to adopt digital media, and then I was the first to market with a free local listings guide and local listings magazines, and before all of those things were popular, and that was absolutely my driving force. And then when I look back on sort of the second chapter of my career to date, this work supporting founders, I was one of the first to create accelerators back in 2011. We created the first pre-accelerator in 2014, the first black accelerator in 2015, and the first scale-up accelerator in 2018 with PwC. And so there's been lots of firsts there that kind of still feel like there's sort of an entrepreneur hidden away behind the advisor frontage. And I guess that continues, because now with VenturePath, we're tackling the Series A, Series B fundraise from a new perspective. This is about how we do it faster, how we do it better, how we equip founders with the tools and templates and resource and support to get their funding rounds done quickly and well. And so I think that there's still a sort of entrepreneurial drive in me about things can be better, we can make things work faster, we can do more with less. And these themes that I think are kind of reflected in my work are also themes that tend to resonate with founders who are also trying to go harder, go further, go faster in their own business. And I think there's a degree of empathy there that maybe if I was just purely ex-Big Four, I might not have. So launching VenturePath was definitely something I felt compelled to do. I was aware that the work I've done over the last 10, 15 years had been really, really useful to lots of companies coming through, and hearing their enthusiastic responses about how sort of help them understand an investor's mindset or help them understand the journey they were on or the stages of the journey was definitely reassuring. When I look back, after a sort of 10-year stint in that world, we supported over 1,000 companies, delivered 70 accelerators, delivered programs internationally, created businesses with 9-figure exits, huge impact, and that was kind of very rewarding to be involved in. But then when I looked at the scale-up landscape, I was very aware that the support infrastructure for the scale-up stage of companies just really wasn't there. So companies that are scaling at Series A, Series B have got different challenges, and the level of support and shared learning and access to proven expertise just really wasn't there. And I looked at that as a challenge, and it felt like something I could definitely help to solve. And that was really why I got behind the idea of kind of driving VenturePath forward. And I guess that ties in then with kind of a vision of the future of where I want this to go. I would like VenturePath to be a safe harbour for scaling entrepreneurs and their cap table, their investors, their advisors, their partners and supporters, to think, okay, we've got a business that's starting to go really well. How do we make sure it gets through the next few stages of its journey? How do we make sure it unlocks the best investment from the best investors to achieve its goals? And money isn't the only way of doing that, clearly, but money is one of the ways that you can resource a business to scale more quickly. So by making it easier, more accessible, giving founders the additional confidence to know how they can raise their money and really successfully grow their business, are absolutely sort of the near-term goals and aspirations for VenturePath. In terms of where that goes, we've done lots of analysis on this, and the investment landscape in the UK at the moment is pretty bleak. The access to Series A funding has dropped by a third in the last 3 years. It's about £600 million a year that isn't being invested into companies. It's about 136 less companies a year than were getting funded just 2 or 3 years ago. And so that represents a real opportunity to kind of dive into what's driving that problem, and using VenturePath and its knowledge of talking with VCs every day and spending time with entrepreneurs as they're on that scaling journey to work out where the gaps are in the funding ladder and in the business support ecosystem at the scale-up phase. And so we've really got behind that as VenturePath. We're helping to drive something called the UK Scale-Up Investment Mission into government, and it broadly across the venture landscape, to help ensure more companies can get access to the growth capital they need to help create more UK venture-backed successes. Okay, so there you go. You've heard a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey, and maybe there's some things in there you didn't know, but it definitely impacts the way we as an organisation think about our community and the founders that we work with. It's a promise we make to support founders, and we work with them shoulder to shoulder until they've achieved their goals, with funding being one of the stages. Our relationships with the companies that we work with are almost always multi-year, multi-funding round, multi-stage, and it includes the ability to have, the structured support that VenturePath provides, but also the informal concilier role, the informal role of being able to give the entrepreneurs support and additional confidence in the tricky moments, having been there myself. And I think that's one of the things that hopefully stands apart from VenturePath and the companies that we choose to work with and that choose to work with us. If that's you, if that sounds like you, then absolutely get in touch and see if we can provide that kind of support, both in terms of access to funding, but also access to the clearer headspace that we aim to support our founders to achieve, by having a clearer vision of the future and a clearer funding roadmap to get them through that.